Morning. So, going to talk today about why most politicians are liars. So, that's a clear and simple truth. Almost everybody understands. What's the old joke? How can you tell a politician is lying? Their lips move. And like all the best liars, politicians lie to themselves first. And the way they do this is by applying a lens of ideology through which they kind of view any situation, and that ideology just overrides any contradictory facts that reality presents them with. And this is quite a hard thing to do. George Orwell said that some ideas so absurd that only an intellectual could believe them. And that's why a lot of politicians come across as quite intelligent people, because they're just very good at really impressive mental gymnastics. Now, I think most political ideologies are actually more like a religion than anything else. I really like the definition of religion you get from Yuval Noah Harari in *Sapiens*, where he talks about a religion as not really being about God or anything supernatural, but actually just a belief in a superhuman order rather than a supernatural one to the world, one that is kind of all moral and all good and explains how everybody should live their life. So, take Marxism, for example. Marxism is arguably a religion. You've got your holy texts, your Communist Manifesto, your Das Kapital, your kind of prophets, your chosen one with Marx, and then all of the various kind of spiritual leaders who've come afterwards to help you interpret those thoughts, like Lenin and Mao or whoever. And similarly, the ideologies of certainly the Labour and Conservative Party are almost religious in the same way. You've got your patron saints, your deities, whatever you want to call them, in the form of people like Blair and Thatcher, who are really venerated. You've got your holy texts, written by people like Giddens and Murray and so forth. And you've most definitely got your true believers who honestly think all that needs to happen to sort out all the problems in the world is for their ideology to be imposed without any form of resistance or criticism, and all of a sudden you will have some kind of utopian paradise. Now, because of that, if you get 10 Labour Party members, 10 Conservative Party members, or whatever supporters, and get them in a room and maybe ask 10 of them a question, you'll get 10 identical answers from the supporters of each party, with maybe on the odd occasion a dissenting voice, one or two. And that ideological consistency, the way that they view the world, is ultimately so simplistic and almost predetermined by their ideology rather than any facts, is why they receive so much money from people like, say, Frank Hester, who knows that actually, regardless of the facts of what would be best for the way to run our NHS, he knows as long as he keeps on funding those politicians, they will always, with their ideology, impose a system of marketisation and privatisation. That means businesses like his can make loads of money. That's why he donates to the Conservatives. That ideology is actually one that is shared by both Labour and the Conservatives. It's why Wes Streeting receives so much money from private healthcare companies and whatnot. Now, I would say you don't get that with the Greens, and you don't get that to a degree with the other less traditional parties such as the Lib Dems. I mean, with the Greens, if you get 10 Greens in a room and ask them a question, you will get 10 distinct opinions typically. I mean, you ask questions about nuclear power, about trans people in single sex spaces, about the EU, Brexit, or even on something environmental like rewilding or population limits. There is a range of opinion within the Green Party. We're a much less unified organisation. There are a lot of Green Party members who, don't agree with my views and vice versa on lots of different topics. And actually, I think that's a good thing. I think it's good to have that debate, and it's good to change your opinion on stuff when new facts come to light. I mean, nuclear power, I don't think I've had a consistent belief on nuclear power for years now. I think that it's such a complex issue. I mean, God, I couldn't explain to you the physics of how a nuclear reactor works, and I think anybody who does is probably lying to you. It's a complex process, all of that physics, atoms, and stuff like that. And so, obviously, as I understand new facts and all of that, my opinion changes. That's what intelligent people do. They're not blinded by ideology. And if you look at even issues where you will find disagreement within the Labour Party, within the Tories, so maybe things like migrational benefits, they're still blinded by their really restrictive ideologies. When the Tories talk about the issues of migration, they'll always say people don't want so much migration, but they won't really engage with why. They won't talk about, well, why actually in a capitalist economy migration forces wages down for certain sections of society, because actually talking to that problem is really outside of their ideological purview. They're not comfortable having that conversation because the answers to that don't chime with their ideology. The answers are, higher minimum wages, better workers' rights, and so forth, and closing down the semi-legal and illegal economies where people who've migrated to this country, maybe not totally legally or totally illegally, are exploited and whatnot. They're not happy having those conversations. Similarly, when you talk about the pressures that having a whole host of, children who no longer speak English as a first language suddenly rock up in a school, and it always is concentrated. All of these problems, they only happen in the kind of poorest areas of society. They're kept well away from the privileged and whatnot, who can pretend these issues don't exist. Now, Labour won't have those conversations, because again, it doesn't chime with their ideology. And with a more local focus, we can see how both these parties delude themselves ideologically, and just in general, how dishonest politicians are. Give you a case in point. I'm going to be careful straight off here because me and Kate, we're not wealthy, we can't afford expensive legal battles, and apparently I can be sued if I say unkind things about people that would make a reasonable person think less of them or whatever. But there are situations where it's just clear someone, maybe lying is too strong, but certainly isn't telling the truth. So, for example, Councillor Broadhead has said he's raised things with Michael Gove, and then we've had responses that are quite contradictory to that. Now, maybe Phil is telling the truth, and he's just not particularly memorable, or Michael Gove is particularly forgetful. But either way, both these statements can't be true. Just like when I walk into a room and the girls are knocked something onto the floor, glass, and it's broken. They can't both have not knocked it over. One of them has done something in that room to knock that glass over. And somebody's not telling the truth here. And similarly, we see with Labour, they were out in force a while ago campaigning for proportional representation. Now, anybody with half a brain remembers actually I don't know, what's the word? A referendum on electoral reform. That was promised, That was a manifesto commitment in 1997 that would happen. Now, that referendum never happened because electoral reform isn't something that benefits the Labour Party or the Conservative Party, and it's something they're really ideologically opposed to. In their organisations, when you strip down to how they function, they don't believe that that kind of electoral reform is a good idea at their core. And so it's very dishonest in my mind. But I tell you what, just like when my girls say, oh yeah, if we get a dog, they'd love a dog, we'll walk it every day. They honestly mean that. I bet you if you ask a lot of Labour members and even candidates for the upcoming parliamentary elections, if they support PR, they will tell you with all honesty, truly believing it themselves, that they support PR. But we know that that will never happen. And I'm going to say, well, I'm going to be really careful about what I say next because one of the issues with I think there's a lot of misinformation and just straightforward dishonesty. Although some of it may be well intentioned, and not from a place of malice and cynicism. The 20-mile-an-hour debate in this area has become really toxic with just a lot of nonsense. So I'm just going to play you a clip here of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee where this was being discussed at one point.
Councillor Waters was very emphatic that if a child is hit by 30 miles per hour, they will die. They don't. I've seen children being hit by a bus and they've bounced up and they've asked if they could have a milkshake, please. So we have to be really careful.
So I've got some lived experience here. I've actually seen 30-mile-an-hour impacts. I've seen 30-mile impact from a bus. Gentleman didn't walk away. It was a friend of mine on his stag do. Now, at the end of that, there was no child asking for a milkshake or anything like that. His daughter, she asks his fiance why they don't stop at the train station anymore to pick him up when they drive past, because she hasn't got her head around the fact that he's dead. Now, like I say, I'm not going to go into any specifics about any comments of any specific councillors because I can't fight that kind of battle in court, you know. But a lot of people are really lying to themselves and lying to each other and lying to the electorate about what the impacts of 30-mile-an-hour speed limits would be, how much they'll cost, what those plans would look like. And it is a problem. And it's a problem we need to tackle. And it's one we can tackle. We can tackle it at the ballot box. We can stop electing people like these. I mean, I'm confident in saying Bobby Dove only got in by a few votes. So getting rid of someone like her is easy. That is something we can absolutely definitely do for the next local elections. And we are going to have general elections in this country soon. And when we do, we don't have to vote for politicians from the Labour Party or the Conservative Party who are just ideologically blind to sorting out any of our problems. They are zealots who will only advocate for solutions that don't work. We've seen through years of them each being in power, they don't sort stuff out. You know, they don't get stuff done. But that's why I'm standing. I want to get elected and I want to sort out Bournemouth. I want to be the MP for Bournemouth East. So I'll be a link to the crowdfunder in the comments. I hope you can get behind me and we can start sorting these problems out. Thanks for your time and for listening.